They sent Mariella Quintero to our stone house at the bend of the Llano River after the winter freeze cracked the pipes and warped the baseboards. It wasn't charity, though Eulala called it that, all saccharine and superior, a local girl trying to make ends meet, Hollis, as if the house needed pity more than cock and grit. As if the woman on my porch with bleach-bitten knuckles and a canvas tote had come to be educated by our rules, our schedule, our smell of cedar polish and old paper. Not to rearrange the way light fell on the rooms I thought I knew. The first day she touched nothing until she understood everything. Asking about the dents on the hallway wall where the antique hall tree used to stand. About the hairline crack above the pantry door that widened in August. About the cigarette burns on the back porch rail from a time I don't talk about. She walked slow, inventorying the house like a field nurse in a storm. And the oddest part was how she looked at me, not past me the way Eulala had learned to. Not through me like locals did when we drove into town for cane syrup and feed. But at me as though I were one of the house's problems with a cause and a fix. I am 65. Bones too familiar with cold fronts. A retired county surveyor with a drawer of brass markers from jobs no one remembers. A man who knows how land shifts when a creek takes a new idea about where it wants to go. Yet I hadn't realized a life can slide the same way until Mariella's eyes made a grid over me. Not unkind, not worshipful, simply precise. That first week she watched my habits, how the kettle screams 2 minutes longer than necessary. How I fold the newspaper by court reports first. How I linger at the picture of the old cattle bridge where I set my first marker at 19, and by Friday she had set the kettle on a lower flame. Placed the paper folded to the bridge photo on the table. And laid the brass marker from my top drawer beside it, the one stamped HWP001. Delicate as a coin at a shrine, Eulala noticed none of that. Only that the baseboards gleamed and the sheets smelled like line-dry childhood. And she told the women at the registrar's office that her house help had hands like a miracle. But at home her voice had the guarded brightness of someone who suspects a trick. We had become careful in recent years, Eulala and I, careful with money, with topics. With the way an accusation can arrive like a stray dog and choose to stay. Careful most of all with silence. The silence had rooms of its own. The den where she scrolled real estate listings in towns she'd never moved to. The kitchen where I timed my rinsing to drown out the click of her messages. The bedroom where we turned away from each other's insomnia as if it were a contagious cough. There was a rhythm to being looked past by the person who'd known you since you both had knees good enough to run into rivers without thinking how you'd climb back out. There's a peace to it. Even, like watching traffic you no longer intend to join. Then came Mariella with her canvas tote and her way of resetting clocks so the three in the house agreed for the first time in years. That second week she asked if I minded a change to the pantry because the order made no sense. Sugar next to varnish, vinegar beside birdseed, and I heard myself say, "Do what you think's right," and meant it. Her hands moved quick, not nervous. And when she reached for the sack of flour I saw the narrow pale scar that cuffed her left wrist like a thread someone had tugged too hard. And before my brain erected the usual fences my mouth asked what had done that, and she said, "A door in a trailer that didn't fit the frame but kept being forced to." And we both let the metaphor sit there and say more than either of us needed to. Eulala was good at metaphors once. She used to name rainstorms like relatives and say the river remembered things people tried to forget, but somewhere between her mother's decline and our son, moving to Albuquerque and the registrar's office drowning in spreadsheets. She traded poetry for the security of forms, boxes, stamped dates. When she told me we should hire help, she meant to fix the house, not us. But the house hardly mattered to me beyond its habit of holding the ghosts in neat rows. What mattered, though I couldn't have said it, was being seen by a new pair of eyes that did not carry old verdicts. It started small. The seeing, she noticed the way my left shoulder twitched when I reached for high shelves and rearranged the storage so I wouldn't need to reach. She noticed the way I stared at the river at 4 in the afternoon and began sweeping the back porch at 3:58 so I'd have a reason to step outside. Pretending it was to hold the screen door for her. She noticed the way I apologized to furniture for bumping it, and she touched the scar on the pantry frame and asked gently who got forced in our house. The day I knew the ground had shifted was a Tuesday when the heat sat stubborn over the pecan grove and the cicadas tried to saw the afternoon in half. I had been cutting open a shipment of filters with a rusted utility knife that used to live in my survey bag, and the blade nicked the pad of my thumb in that mean quick way that makes a grown man feel stupid. I said nothing, ran it under the tap, wrapped it with a paper towel. She saw the drip on the yellow tile and said, "Stop," just like that, a command not a request. Voice not raised, and took my hand to the light, the paper towel pinked through. And she was already tearing a strip from the clean cotton rag she keeps in her tote. Already pressing, already asking if I felt dizzy. And in that small authoritative attention my body remembered being worth the trouble. She wrapped the thumb snug, crossed the ends like a bowline knot, my knot. The one I taught our boy on the old dock, and I could have cried for how a gesture can travel backward in time and make you young for a heartbeat. She must have read that in my face because her smile was not the sweet kind but the acknowledging one people give each other in court hallways when a truth has finally been stated. Aloud, that evening I stood longer than usual at the river fence and watched the turtles surface where the current slackens, each dark head a coin spent by someone patient. Eulala came out, phone in hand. Told me that the registrar's office was switching to a new system in June and everyone over 50 would need to retrain on Saturdays. Said it in the tone of surrender masked as professionalism. I said I could drive her. And she said she might ride with patients from payroll to save gas. And then she looked at the bandage on my thumb and asked, without looking at my face. She did that? And I said yes. The quiet between us then wasn't the old careful kind but a new animal, alert and low to the ground. We ate dinner at the small table in the blue room where the AC works best. She told me the town was starting a committee to restore the old cattle bridge and that they'd asked if I'd consult for a stipend. Someone remembered the markers after all, and in my chest a door unswollen by humidity opened a finger's width. She said I should take it. That it would get me out of the house and keep me from hovering over the help. And I heard the sharpness she didn't intend. After she went to bed I checked the brass marker drawer and found the HWP001 had been polished. I don't keep polish in the house, the tote must contain a universe. Wednesday she brought me a small plastic box with compartments, a surveyor's organizer. Repurposed, to hold the screws that had been breeding in my junk drawer. She looked me over again, not in hunger, not in pity, and said, "You're underusing your left side." Compensation becomes a cage, and I laughed because the phrase sounded like something I should have told a junior crew member years ago. I asked where she learned to speak like that and she shrugged, said, "Between jobs you pick up languages, plumbing, grief, men, with no heat on the last word. I wanted to ask about the trailer with the bad door, the other houses, the other men. But I kept to safe ground and asked if she liked Llano. She said the river made her feel recognized. And I knew exactly what that meant even if I couldn't explain it to Eulalia. On Thursday a wind whipped through that smelled like rain and pennies. And Eulalia texted me a shopping list, though she could have left it on the counter. And the top item read bleach, the second read gloves, thick, the third read boundaries. My thumb pulsed where the knot lay neat as a stitch. Mariella arrived 20 minutes early because storms make traffic silly. And as she shook droplets from her hair, she glanced at the list without moving her eyes and then looked again at me. And here is the thing I cannot file under accident, like she'd witnessed the shape of a marriage more clearly than the people inside it. Storms pull nails out of boards that already wanted to quit, she said. Checking the western sky, I almost told her that the cattle bridge had been mismeasured in 1939 by a man with a bad boot who refused to admit he limped. And the river had taken its revenge in little bites for 80 years. Instead, I said we should close the windows in the blue room because the AC unit protests if it feels left out, and she smiled at the person who names machines like relatives. Lightning stitched the horizon, rough and bright. Eulalia came home early for once. Hair frizzing, eyes on my bandage again. And when she spoke to Mariella, her voice wore that Sunday tone, all soft performance. After supper she asked Mariella to sit a minute and then asked, too directly, whether the work was enough or if she needed more hours. And Mariella's face did a proud thing I recognized in the river. It held, enough, she said. But I prefer tasks with names, and when Eulalia asked what that meant, she said, identify the problem, assign a method, complete it. Dust is not a problem, mildew is. Boredom is not a problem, loneliness is. And for a heartbeat Eulalia looked relieved, like someone handed a map. Then she stood, gathered plates, said we'd see her Saturday if the storm didn't wash the road. That night the wind made the pecans creak like old ribs. And I lay awake feeling too seen and not seen enough by two women under my roof. I want to say I didn't imagine anything beyond the work, beyond the new committee, beyond a man remembered for more than his quiet. But a thought like a spark ran along a wire in me. If someone sees you not as a relic or a mistake but as a solvable thing, does it fix you or set you on fire? When sleep finally came, it brought the sound of a door learning how to fit its frame without being forced, the soft click of alignment, a promise or a warning, I could not yet tell. On Saturday the rain refused to let up and the Llano swelled fat against its banks. Red clay spinning where cattle used to wade. And Eulalia left in Patience's car with her registrar files balanced on her lap. Leaving the house to Thunder and me, Mariella arrived on foot, umbrella shredded by gusts. Jeans dark to the knee, tote still clutched like it contained oxygen. She laughed when she saw me at the porch railing with a towel. Said the rain had teeth and wasn't letting go. And when she stepped into the blue room, the scent of wet earth filled the house in a way no polish ever had. She asked where I kept candles in case the power failed. And I told her the drawer near the hall tree dent, and she nodded like she'd expected that. The lights flickered and I caught her eyes in the dim, steady, not afraid. Not performative, just steady. I hadn't been looked at steadily in years without someone calculating what it might cost. She said the house groaned like a boat and asked if it was built on crawlspace or slab, and when I told her slab she said the river will always argue with slabs, and my chest filled with an odd pride that she understood the land's stubbornness. The afternoon turned electric, every gust rattling glass. And at one point a crack from the pecan grove split the air, one of the giants downed. We rushed to the porch and there it lay, angled across the fence like an old drunk. Leaves still shaking with disbelief, I cursed softly, remembering that fence-line survey. And she touched my sleeve and said, "Some things fall to show where the weakness always was." I don't know why that sentence landed inside me like a marker hammered into rock. When the storm cut the power, the house sighed and went still. No hum, no AC, only rain on roof. I lit 2 stubby candles, one in the kitchen, one in the den. And she asked if I wanted tea, though the kettle was useless, and then, without waiting, she set a saucepan on the gas flame we could still coax with a match. She brewed chamomile from her tote, not our Lipton bags, and handed me a chipped mug. Said it would calm the shoulder twitch. I stared at the steam and felt absurdly young. The kind of young that thinks one act of care means everything is possible. The silence was thick but not hostile. She asked about the brass markers, why I kept them. What they proved. I told her they proved nothing lasts the way you draw it. That even iron pins vanish if a river wants them gone. She sipped, then said, "But you kept them, so maybe they prove something else, you." And the word lodged like a splinter I didn't want removed. Hours passed with the storm. And we found ourselves at the table with the organizer box of screws. Her showing me how she sorted by thread, by head type, by color of corrosion, her fingers deft. Scar wrist glinting in candlelight. She spoke of a brother in Laredo who welded until his lungs gave up. Of a son she didn't keep because the man in the trailer said no. And I listened without comment, sensing the danger of sympathy that arrives too quick. Outside the rain softened, crickets tested the air, and the house seemed to lean closer. Waiting. When Eulala returned late, damp and sharp with exhaustion. She stopped in the doorway at the sight of us hunched over screws like children playing marbles, and for a heartbeat her face revealed something, alarm, maybe. Or grief, before the registrar mask slid back on. She asked why the lights were out and I said storm, she said figures. Then saw the candles and muttered about fire codes. Mariella packed her tote slow, her eyes not leaving mine until the last moment. And when she stepped into the wet night I felt the house taller, hollower. Eulala rinsed her hands long at the sink and said, "You look different," not accusing. Not kind, just a note pinned to the door of a marriage already wandering. I had no answer. Only the echo of Mariella's phrase, "Some things fall to show where the weakness always was."